side of the charcoal for the bottom. Again, have you seen me doing any blending or smudging yet? Personally, I'm not big on blending and smudging. You can get your fingers in there, you can get a chamois in there, you can get a blending stump, a piece of paper. I've seen some of my students have done all sorts of different styles. I'd save the blending for later. If you're going to do blending at all, which you don't have to. If you're good with charcoal, you don't need to do blending with your finger or with any of that stuff, at least not every time. So I'm kind of darkening the top a little bit. There we go. Blending down, because since the light is coming from here, it's passing over these the top and the left edge, but it's also hitting the table surface in my imaginary still life and bouncing back up onto the surface of the cube. But that's really the more reflected light hits down towards the bottom of the cube. It's subtle, but if you push it a little bit, and I'm pushing it just so you can see what I'm talking about, then it'll really look more realistic. Now with the top surface, it's getting a lot of direct light. It really doesn't have a whole lot of shadow going on, but there are certain techniques and tricks. The lightest charcoal stroke could sometimes still be kind of chunky and black and like splotchy, so I use my fingers. I just take a little bit of the charcoal that I've got on my fingers. If you've been using a charcoal pencil, maybe you can even rub onto one of your fingers. And I'm just going to go back here. Since I want to run with the concept of you cannot have the same value on two different surfaces. You know, you have a vertical surface and a horizontal surface coming together. You cannot have the same value on both sides of that edge. You know, that edge in between is only an edge because there are two different surfaces. The way our eyes work, the way light works, if two things of the same value come together, you won't see the difference, you won't see the separation. You'll always be, if there's a change in the surface, there's always going to be a change in the value. That's how we see the change in the surface direction. I want to keep there a good stark contrast in the different surfaces. So I'm going to go back here to the back of the top surface and just drop in a little bit of some value just with my dirty fingertips. Some people are heavy-handed with this, some people are very light-handed with this, and there's no really hard and fast rule except be gentle. You know, you can always add more, but it's harder to take away. Now you might be saying, hey, yeah, it looks like a cube. Yeah, okay, that works all right. But there are two things we've left out. Very important, if you have an object and you want it to look like it's really in actual space, if you're doing shading on an object, you've got to have a drop shadow. You just have to. So the drop shadow is very important. It will make this piece really look like it's existing in real space, but will also, as you're about to see, it will actually help you clean up your drawing a bit. So we're looking at the direction of the light and what is actually the barrier preventing the light from hitting this area of the table down here. And is it this edge, this vertical edge right here preventing the light? Well, really, I mean, if the light is being stopped by these edges, hey, maybe this vertical edge is the first one that the light comes in contact with. So using this direction for our light, there we go. And the light is continuously being blocked by this entire surface and this entire surface, but then this corner also, which I don't have very well defined. This corner here is also blocking light. Now I said no lines, so if I'm drawing these lines with the edge of the charcoal, I have to turn these into areas of value. So I'm going in here. The drop shadow is really right up under the surface, right up under the object that we're drawing. This cube that we're drawing is the darkest thing in the entire drawing. Now I know I'm going in stages and everything, so I'm leaving the drop shadow to last. I didn't want to start by drawing a drop shadow before I've drawn the object. even though I said to start with the darkest thing, the darkest area. So right up under this cube, I'm going in and making this really dark and rich and black, and then blending that out. Because as the shadow gets further away from the object, there's more ambient light that's going to be coming in and kind of fading that shadow out. That's why you see shadows often fade. But a really strong light, you have a very well-defined shadow. A little bit lighter light that's further away from an object, you have a hazier, fuzzier edge to your shadow. You decide the way you want it to look. So I'm also going to come across here, across this surface on the right, and bring that in nice and dark. See that totally tidied up the bottom edges of my cube. Take that, start blending. And to use strokes that go in the direction of the shadow really helps, to make sure that you're not going to give it, inadvertently give it a texture that you didn't intend to, or a grain or something like that. Check my parallel lines. Yeah, that's about right. We can fade that off. Now, another thing that's going to help this piece be grounded in actual space is I often like to, when I'm doing something out of my head like this, for an example, often you set up a still life on a stand or on a table. Well, where are the edges of that table? Is that a massively huge table and somehow we're only taking a shot in the middle? Or can you see the edge of the table? So I can just arbitrarily, this is up to you, I'm going to pick a height and I'm going to put in a horizontal line. I'm going to try to track it all the way across. I think. I'm going to say, okay, that's the table surface. Now I'm going to go in with just a medium gray as a base, maybe a 30 or 40% gray if you're keeping track. Keep it light. Okay. Now, here's an important thing about background for a charcoal drawing. You want to make sure that the background value that you're using, when it comes in contact with your actual object, is a very different value from what is right there at the outside edges of the object. You can see right here I'm getting where, that's breaking my big rule of you cannot have the same value on two different surfaces right up against each other. So what I can do is, for the background, for the tabletop, there, I'm just making it a little bit darker, just a little bit darker. And then blending that so it's not just a splotch of darker value. It actually looks like it's meant to be. So now, definitely see that the cube is standing out from the background. Over here you have a little bit of the same problem. I'm going to actually make the cube a little bit darker there, just so we're not breaking that one cardinal rule. I just have to have two different values, the surfaces that come together. Okay, now the background, the air. Very simple rule that I've always used with my students. It always works well. When you look at the drawing and you see the value of the object, the value that you choose to do in the background has to be, as a rule, I typically say opposite, different. But see how the surface right here on the outside edges of our drawing of our cube is really dark. So what's the background going to be like? It's going to be very light, so that they stand apart, so they stand to be different from each other. There's my dirty fingers again that I like to use as very light charcoal. But oh man, the top is so light. Well, since you've got this full range of light to dark, since the top surface of the cube is very, very light, I can use anything from middle gray on to black as the background you choose. Since right next to that area down here in your drawing is very light, you don't have to go very far to get a different value. I'm just going to go like a medium, a bit of a medium gray, black. Kind of use the edge of your charcoal to really define get a crisp edge to that area of value. My lines are getting a little crooked. I trust you'll forgive me. A little bit of grace goes a long way. And so I'm bringing this value, this kind of medium gray value, around the top of the box, kind of filling in a lot of the area in the background, and fading off towards the corners a little bit. I'm going to even it out in a second. Just want to lay this out for you. But now when I'm coming down around this left side of the box, the value right there on the outside edge of my actual object is pretty dark, so I just have to make sure that the background is lighter and make sure that it's different enough so that the box stands out, stands off the surface. So I'm going with a real gentle hand here, never leaving white space for no reason. Just go right up to, and my charcoal, as you can see, is actually going over both surfaces, so that there's no like white glow. Some people are so careful about where they draw with charcoal that they leave spaces untouched, and the only white that should be on your paper is for the brightest highlights. We haven't even cut in any highlights. We'll just do that for a second in a minute. Okay, so that's pretty much it. If I was doing this drawing by myself, I would probably only take about 2 or 3 minutes to do it. It's very simple, it's out of the head, you know, it's basically just to get the concepts down for chiaroscuro and for high contrast shading and everything. If you want to go in, you don't see a whole lot of whites. If you want to go in and take an eraser, go into some of the areas where you think it's just a little too sloppy, you can see that the eraser is easily picking up a lot of the charcoal and cutting in highlights. You can break up the surface because you don't want the top of the box to be bright white over the entire surface, because that would mean it's reflecting light like a mirror, and this is not a mirror cube. You can make up whatever the texture is that you want it to be made out of. So, wrapping up, we've got our drawing of a cube with charcoal finished up, and you can see the major points that I was trying to make. No lines in this kind of charcoal drawing. You want to try to make it look realistic. These lines on every edge and boxing things in, they do not exist, so don't draw them. And my other main point about you cannot have the same value on 2 different surfaces as they come together. The surfaces going in different direction. If there's a change in direction of the surface, you'll never have the same value coming up to each other on both sides of an edge. So you can see on all the edges that we see, there's different values on each side of the edge at every point. So if you follow that simple little rule, when you're doing your charcoal drawings, even if you can't quite see in the object, I'm not sure if it really changes so much, use those as guidelines, those points as guidelines, and push the lights and push the darks. Find the brightest thing in your highlight, in your drawing, in your still life, and make that the white of the paper. Find the darkest, deepest, darkest shadow and make that as black as you can with the charcoal, and push all of the other values in between, and you'll come up with a really great drawing. And keep practicing, keep trying out different objects and different surfaces and textures with charcoal, and you'll be a pro before you know it. So I want to say thank you for joining us on this podcast from the University of Central Florida, the Center for Research and Education in Arts, Technology, and Entertainment, here at Create. Thanks for joining us, and have a lovely day.